Welcome back to Sidewalk, Skyline podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rogers. Today, my guest is Jennifer Hyde. She's the executive director at the Leamington Community Hope Centre. They're located in downtown Leamington, Ontario, at the old Knox Presbyterian Church. The church closed down. This organization incorporated as a charity and opened their doors in January. We're going to hear more about some of the activities, but right now what I'd like to do is introduce Jennifer Hyde.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, great to have you on, Jennifer. And really, I guess, gotten to know each other since you and your husband Roy and the family moved to Leamington.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew of you guys before that because when my kids were in youth group, they used to take trips to Petrolia and hang out with the youth group that was in the church you guys were at.
That's right. I remember them well, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you and I step onto an elevator and we're going to the 30th floor. And it's a fast elevator, so you've got 3 minutes to tell me about Leamington Community Hope Centre, and go.
All right, 3 minutes. Wow. Okay, well, we are, at its core, we are a faith-based organization. And really our mandate is just to help and serve people in loving and practical ways. Now, as you mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization. We are based in the heart of downtown Leamington at the old Knox Presbyterian Church on Erie Street. And the way we look at our programming is we really base it on 4 key pillars of health. So the first one being physical health, next is mental health, social health, and then lastly is spiritual health. So our physical health programs would be our drop-in center, our donation center, and our pantry, which is our take-home grocery service. Our mental and social programming would revolve around addiction services and different social clubs that we offer. And then lastly is our spiritual health programming. And that's really where we walk alongside our guests as they travel through a spiritual journey and kind of help them really discover who God is and what it means that God loves me. So like I said, really our mandate is just to help people in the Leamington downtown core.
Wow, and we're only at floor 22.
All
so
right.
You did very well.
There we go.
Yeah. You're new as the executive director. Just at the time we're recording in July, and how long have you been there now?
Yes, I've been there since middle of February, so very new.
Very new.
Mm.
And you're also relatively new to Leamington.
We are. We moved to the area about a year ago, actually.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So first impressions are always important. And how would you describe Leamington?
Wow, we absolutely love Leamington. It really is a thriving and growing community. What I am surprised about in terms of what we're offering at the center is I would have expected a lot of homelessness, which there is some homelessness, but what we're finding even more so is people who are just down and out. They're at a situation in life where it's either, you pay for your rent or you feed your family and yourself, and they can't do both. And that's really the bulk of the clients we're finding coming in through the doors in Leamington. But as a whole, it is a great community. There are a lot of good resources there. There just needs to be more.
I think that's becoming more and more true in most of our Canadian cities.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's why it's so important for something like the Hope Centre or for your organizations, Feeding Windsor-Essex, that they're playing such a vital role in bettering their local communities as a whole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll talk more about, some of the activities of the center, some of that story, but I'm interested in hearing your story.
Okay.
And so this is actually being an executive director that's kind of a new vocation for you.
Mm-hmm.
And
it is new.
So tell me about your life. Tell me where you come from and some of the paths that you've been on through this journey.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Oshawa, Ontario. I was raised in a solid Christian home, a lot of love there. And, Jesus was always an important part of my life growing up, which I appreciate having that foundation as a child. By the time I was a teenager, I really started to understand kind of the role that God plays in our lives and how important that hope is that we have in Jesus. And as a teenager, I had a lot of opportunity to travel around, and I would get to sing and speak at various locations. And a lot of that was focused in downtown Toronto,
Hmm.
which was a huge eye opener for me. What I was finding, I think myself and a lot of other people, we have this assumption that the homeless population, that either they're terrible people or they've had this catastrophic event in their life. But what I was discovering through that is that's not necessarily the case. Now that does happen, but a lot of it is just those little everyday choices that we make. And we're just one step away, really, of changing the entire course of our life by those little individual decisions. So it was an interesting journey for me to kind of discover that through various street outreach programs that I was involved in. A little more about me. So when I was 15, I met and started dating the person that would become my husband. So I was 15 at the time, and he was 16.
Yeah.
Yep, also in Oshawa, and we got married, had a couple of wonderful kids, adult children now, and we stayed in Oshawa for a little while. So I started building a real estate career for myself, and he at the time was working in the school board. And if you know Oshawa at all, you know South Oshawa. South Oshawa is a very difficult, tough area.
Yeah.
There is a major gang concentration in South Oshawa. And actually, also at the time when he was working there, it was the teen pregnancy capital of Canada per capita,
Hmm.
was right in South Oshawa. So he was working in the school, mentoring and leading some after school sports programs and things. And he would come home with just these stories that were heartbreaking, and it was terrible to hear the situations that these kids and these teens were in, especially as a mom having young kids myself at
Yeah.
that stage.
Yeah.
So we at one point, I wanted to bring all those kids home. That wasn't
Yeah.
legal. So at one point we really felt God calling us to just sell our house and move down to that area and just embed ourselves in that community. Hemmed and hawed about that quite a bit, but we went ahead and
You
did
should have
that.
talked to a real estate agent. They
That's
could have
right.
advised you against that.
And that they would. But you know what? We made that decision. It was rather shocking when we would tell, our family and friends. And I'm not going to lie, it was a little scary bringing my children into that environment. But, we thought we would go there and make this huge impact. And we did have the opportunity to work with some kids, but even more so, they impacted us. And the things we were able to learn from that, and stuff that we would use in our future that we didn't realize at the time.
Hmm.
So it was a great learning experience. And through that, from there, seasons change, life happens, and we ended up moving to Petrolia, which isn't too far from here.
Is that kind of like the polar opposite of South Oshawa?
It very much is,
Yeah.
yes. Small farming community.
Yeah.
Petrolia is a wonderful town.
Yeah.
And that's where our children spent the bulk of their childhood and their teenage years. And like I said, it was a great town, but of course life happens, and it's expensive. Kids are expensive. And I got in the business world again, and I was working for the bank at that time in the banking and finance industry. And I enjoyed my career. I had a lot of great opportunities through that, but I was just never fulfilled, and I never felt like I was doing enough. And
Hmm.
so I was a branch manager for about 10 years for a major bank, which was great. And then most recently, I had moved into a corporate executive role. And like I said, it was just never really fulfilling. And I always wanted something a little bit different in my career. And yeah, eventually the Hope Center came along, and that's totally changed the course of where I'm headed.
Yeah. Now, when you took the position Was that just kind of like, yes, this is it, I want to do this? Or did you struggle with it? Like, because
Yes.
you hadn't worked in that sector per se, although being in a church all your life, your husband being a pastor, I'm sure that you had a good conditioning, let's
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tackle that part first.
Okay.
Being in a church and being involved in the community. I think that's so important. And honestly, I think we still have such a long way to go in that.
Mhm.
And I am grateful to be part of a community minded church, and I love that. But again, I think we struggle finding that balance of offering those inward programs, which are important. Let's develop and encourage Christians, but we also need to find that balance of outward reaching programs and how do we get into the community to share God's love. So I think
Mhm.
we're getting there,
Yeah.
but we still have some work to do. And I see the church really as a training facility, and that's where we should be equipping and training and empowering Christians to then go into the world to preach the gospel in practical and loving ways.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for the many volunteers that we have from our churches,
Mhm.
whether it be at the Hope Center or your programs, or just in the community in general. The people that are called to volunteer and to
Yeah.
do missions work, and whether that be full time or whenever they can squeeze that in their
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
life. And I think it's those people that are really going to lead the way in changing our culture and our mindset of the way we do church. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think you're very correct in talking about the church needs to be a place that people get trained in
Absolutely.
loving their neighbor.
Hmm.
And I when you were in your teens and youth group and you were going with teams downtown Toronto, uh, are there any memories or stories of experiences you had doing some of that just kind of formed something in you?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to, like I was saying earlier, it's those little life choices that people were making along the way.
Yeah.
And I would be sitting there with, a teenage girl that it was just coming off the street that
Hmm.
she had no other way to provide for herself other than offering her body in those
Yeah.
situations. And here I am coming from this great home and same age,
Hmm.
right? And just seeing how vastly different our lives are. And,
Hmm.
I had Jesus and I had that hope, and she was still searching. And to have that opportunity to just share that and say, hey, you
Hmm.
know what? Someone loves you for who you are inside versus what you can offer.
Right.
Those
Right.
things really stood out to me at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the ministry of a church is teaching and proclamation, but sitting in a church with the air conditioning on and a comfortable chair or a padded pew and the multimedia and lots of safe people sitting around you. It's easy to um, hear and comprehend things, but it's another thing when you get out of the church and you go on mission and you
Hmm.
have that five senses experience.
Absolutely.
And so, volunteers at LCHC, you've got
Hmm.
a lot of volunteers actually for just getting started.
We do. Yes, we have an amazing group of people from, some of them come from our local churches, some of them from various community organizations, but they are just willing to spend their time, and they're just chatting with people and playing board games and watching movies, and it's incredible to see those relationships developing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I'll just answer your question. You had said to me, how I kind of ended up in this role
yeah.
because it
Oh
is
yeah, yeah.
vastly different. And it's a bit of an interesting story because Uh, when we moved here, like you said, about a year ago, I was just feeling unsettled, and my husband jokes it was my midlife crisis, but
Thanks a lot, eh?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. But I was just, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted change.
Yeah.
And a friend of ours was speaking with me, and that person said to me, if you had your dream job, what would it be? And I said, I would love to be an executive director of a nonprofit organization. And that's actually the term I used. And to me, at that point, that was just a pipe dream. There was no
Mhm.
way, that would actually happen. Until one day, my husband, he had a meeting with the board of what would become the Leamington Community Hope Centre.
Mhm.
And they told him all about the vision and, their heart for Leamington as a whole. And that they were in search of an executive director, and they wanted somebody that could bring that business acumen and a love for people, etc. And he came home, and it was late. I didn't realize it was almost midnight, but he came home and he said, I think I found the perfect job for you. I was like, tell me about it. And he shared, and I was so excited. And I'm like, you need to call them right now. Like, please just reach out.
Yeah.
And much to my dismay, he would not. But the next day, I was able to get a hold of them, and we met and had an interview, and it went really, really well. And I loved, again, hearing their vision. And I was so excited about that. And they offered me the role. And you would think I would jump all over it, but I am ashamed to say I turned it down. I got cold feet, and I didn't have the faith I needed to jump right in. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got this great career that I've built, and with that comes security and all those great benefits, and I thought, I can't walk away from it. And then a lot of sleepless nights and back and forth, and I had turned the job down. And my husband and we lead the young adults group at our church.
Mhm.
And we were at young adults, and there I was speaking about, going all in for God and getting out of your comfort zone and taking that step of faith and
Yeah.
following God's plan. And I heard myself speaking, and I looked over at my husband, and I was like, what have I done?
Yeah.
In that moment, I was like, what have I done?
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So I got a hold of the board right away, and I said, would you reconsider me? And they had grace enough to meet with me again. And, we came to an agreement, and I took the position, and I will never look back. Like, what a great choice and a
Yeah.
great opportunity that was there for me.
If I can just dig in a little bit there,
Hmm.
this we can see opportunities that excite us, that seem like a good challenge for us personally,
Hmm.
but then we can hit that impasse. And why do you think that the first time you said no?
Hmm.
Like unpack that, because
Yeah.
I think that that's not a unique thing. I think a lot of people go through that. So
Hmm.
what was the inner dialogue that was saying, I don't know?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think for me, like I said, I had security. I was safe, and
What and security means,
security in terms of, a solid career, long-term path ahead of me
right?
financially, and it was
Yeah.
secure for me. Whereas this is a risk. It is a startup, right? And so you're weighing those things, and
So risk is an important part of
risk is
taking
important.
taking a step of faith, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then there's self-doubt comes in. Like, am
Hmm.
I capable of doing this?
Hmm.
All my experience is in finance
Hmm.
and business management. And am I going to be able to do this? Or am I a fraud? Am I trying to kid myself?
Right.
Right? So we deal with that human side of it, I think. And then I had to just go back to what I know and what I've been taught, that, what, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Nothing great happens in your comfort zone. You've got to take that step outside of that and just trust. And I knew at the heart of it what I was called to do. And I knew that I wanted to work with people, and I wanted to make an impact. Not that you can't do that in the business world, but I knew that my role was to do it differently. And yeah, like I said, I was sitting there and I was preaching it and speaking it to this next generation. And I thought, well, again, what have I done? I
Right,
walked away from that.
right,
Hmm.
right. I think it's interesting how sometimes the people that do the best in a role or a task are not necessarily the people that walked a straight line to get there. And sometimes it's the way that life has shaped you otherwise
Hmm.
that actually um, amplifies or multiplies the effectiveness. You know, if you had, been a good Christian girl that went to Bible college and then,
Yes.
right into working at a church and be doing that all the way, you might be great at it. You
Hmm.
might be very effective, but sometimes the people that God uses have this whole other life experience that somehow informs, what they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing I find is that open doors from God aren't always um, us going on a massive search. Like you weren't on the internet doing job searches to find out, where can I do this? Or
Hmm.
maybe you were, I don't know.
No,
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 but out of the blue, here's an open door.
that's
Um,
right.
yeah,
And we just have to take that step of faith to walk through that door, right?
yeah,
And that's where I was struggling.
yeah.
Hmm.
What do you think we're afraid of when it comes to those kind of risks? I mean, security
Myself,
is one thing, right? Not want to lose what you have.
yeah, myself, I think it's failure. I think
Yeah,
because I am very driven and
yeah,
I A-type personality. I want to do everything to perfection.
yeah.
Stepping into the unknown where I'm not the expert in this, right? Yes,
Hmm.
I can bring my skill set to this and I could, I have something to offer,
Right.
but I don't have that expertise.
Yeah.
But what I've learned too is I don't have to be an expert in everything, right? I can rely on partnerships
Yeah.
and you folks played a role in that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to say, "Hey, I don't know this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
can you help me with this?"
Yeah.
Right?
So for people who are listening or watching the podcast, the church I'm at, New Song Church in Windsor, we have some developed outreach programs. One of which is feeding Windsor-Essex. Part of that is another thing called Street Angels, and so we're doing a lot of work in the community space around food security and helping churches to develop a hospitality and loving their neighbor, uh, caring for the homeless population. And so what you're referring to was that we were able to come alongside in the beginnings and just help you guys get started. And it didn't take you guys long to figure out what you were doing.
We're still figuring it out, but yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say how appreciative we are of that.
yeah,
Your organization and Street Angels, they really set it up for us, and they got us up and running, and like I said, set it up for success. So we are eternally grateful for that. So thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, it's been quite the journey, and we have grown very, very quickly.
yeah. You have. Well, I think part of that, I mean, I think they hired well, in
Thank
terms of
you.
an
Yeah,
executive director
thanks.
who didn't feel qualified and didn't know if she could do it, but she's doing it.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But I think another part of the story is really those entrepreneurs. Talk a bit about um, the team that first started wrapping their head around the idea that we need to do something in Leamington because the poverty is pervasive and it's it's becoming more apparent on the streets.
Hmm.
And talk about those people that you can use their names if you want, unless they asked you to sign a non-disclosure, feel free to talk about the people that got this thing going.
Absolutely. So it is three local entrepreneurs, very successful men that are running very successful businesses. The first one being Peter Quiring.
Hmm.
So Peter is of Nature Fresh and South Essex Fabrication.
Hmm.
And he has an incredible story as well. You need to have him on your podcast,
We
actually.
probably we probably should. Yeah.
Yes, so he walked through the whole business world, and he was conquering that world, and he just came to faith recently, and I don't know all the
Wow.
details of that, but I believe it's 3 to 4 years ago.
Wow.
And his mentality shifted,
Hmm.
and he's now it used to be the art of the business deal that would excite Peter, and now it's just helping people. And
Wow.
he's such a genuine person, and he's down there hands on, just sitting alongside these gentlemen coming in for these various
Yeah.
services, and it's incredible to see. And then George Bergen
Hmm.
is involved as well. He's one of the founders of the Bridge in
Okay.
Leamington,
Hmm.
which is another organization for youth, and they're
Hmm.
doing incredible things. They've been around for quite some time, and George again has a heart for outreach and for reaching people with the message of hope and the message of Jesus.
Hmm.
And then lastly is Henry Neufeld.
Hmm.
So Henry is just, when you meet him, he's just so much joy radiating from him. You
Yeah.
can't even describe it. He's got this great laugh and such a genuine heart for
Yeah.
loving people. And again, he's down there. If we need something done around the building, we call Henry, and he's got a crew of like 15, 20 guys that are there the next
Wow.
day just wanting to help. So they are big dreamers and they are visionaries, and they came together and they said, what can we do to make a difference here, a lasting difference in the town, and what is needed, and what are the gaps?
Mm.
And they came together with this vision. Like you said, they incorporated back in the fall, and they created this strategic plan it's so vast. There's so many amazing things that they want to see happening. Sometimes I have to rein them in and slow them down and say
Hmm.
one step at a
Hmm.
time. But it's incredible to have their vision and also their support. They've
Yeah.
they've created an environment where it's okay for us as a staff to try something
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
learn from it and change it, or maybe just move on to something totally different. They've empowered us to be able to do that as we follow God's leading and together kind of bring this vision to life.
Yeah.
It really is a great team.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. Like all three of those guys have done extremely well, right?
Absolutely.
They know how to do business, and they have many, many employees, and and I don't know all of their businesses, but in some cases it's global, right? The
Absolutely.
the they work in big pictures,
Mhm.
and yet having that heart and that vision for the least of these in their
Absolutely.
community. That's so beautiful. I think that's another really neat part of the LCHC story is these guys, because how many business people are going to a local church, uh, and they're sitting in the pew and taking it all in, and you know putting their money in the offering, and
Mhm.
maybe they go to the men's breakfast, or the women's gathering, or they're but church is almost it's important to them. It's part of their spiritual nurture, but it kind of is when I go,
Mhm.
and that's how connected I am to the church.
That's right.
But when the mission takes over your life, and you say, I'm on a mission with God, and the world is my mission field. I need to I need to figure out how to do that.
Hmm.
Um, that's those guys, man. I do need to have Peter on. Maybe I need to have all of them
You
on.
do,
Yeah,
you do.
yeah, and just explore that whole idea of, putting shoes on the gospel, and yeah,
Absolutely. Yep, they are the ones, again, going back to, our discussion about church being not just inward focused.
yeah,
These are the people that are trailblazers in the fact
yeah,
of, you know, reaching into the community and using their business mindset and the gift
yeah,
they've been given
yeah,
to have this huge positive impact,
yeah,
which is incredible.
and Wolfgang Weber, he's
Yes.
he's part of the board, or
He is part of the board, yes.
yeah.
So he was their
Hmm.
interim executive director.
Hmm.
Um, Wolfgang is a brilliant business mind,
Hmm.
and he was alongside of them in the beginning and still today.
Yeah,
And he kind of set them up and helped them out with, creating that business structure and what that side of it needs to look like.
yeah,
And yet now he's a member of the board, and he's been a huge help for myself personally. He's the first one to answer the phone and say, "Hey, I'm coming down to sit alongside you. We'll figure this out together." So,
yeah.
yeah, an incredible person.
I'm so used to seeing startups like missions that are in a ratty old storefront,
Hmm.
they're um, uh, begging for every donation they can get, and running around to grocery stores to get food, and
Yeah.
that kind of mom and pop operation in charity. um, it, it it's one thing when you feel that calling. Oh, I just really would like to have a soup kitchen, and you sometimes people will want to have that unfold in their life. I mean, LCHC, like I've never seen such a startup. Like it's starting with at such a advanced level,
Hmm.
and it's a great thing to see.
It really is a unique opportunity, like you said.
Yeah.
We're in a bit of a different situation. We were able to have this beautiful building to
Hmm.
be able to operate out of with so much space.
Yeah.
So now it's
Yeah.
determining how do we use that effectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will give you the heads up, if you have them on your podcast, allocate about 4 hours worth of
4 hours.
time. Yeah.
Okay. We'll need more cameras.
That's right, for sure.
Maybe we'll do a Zoom call with them. Yeah. Um, but again, this idea of, finding, shoes for the gospel. How do you put something together? How do you get into it? And sometimes the person who says, "I want to work in a soup kitchen," or I want to start a soup kitchen. There needs to be more definition to it, right? Like
Hmm.
that. This is a good business plan when you actually are saying, okay, well, no, I actually have to define it in multiple ways. We have to, because the person who wants to open a soup kitchen could be a person who just really likes soup and likes making soup and thinks everybody should have soup, you know. They could be a person who isn't really interested in making the soup. They want to sit down at the table and just be close to the people that are coming,
Hmm.
and then other people, they want to help. But they don't want to be in charge. They don't want to run something.
Yep.
And then you got the executive director,
Hmm.
who's your job is not going in every day and sitting at the table for a few hours with the guests that are coming in, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
You're right. Everybody's role is very, very different, and everybody's passion is very, very different.
yeah,
And it takes all of those type of people. It takes all of those personalities.
yeah,
I've had the opportunity to go to a few different churches, and we speak about what we're doing, and we're asking for volunteers. And we take some time to go through that. Let's identify what your gifts are,
Yep.
and then let's place you according to those gifts.
Yeah.
So we have people that are on the floor and sitting and just having those conversations. But equally as important is somebody who's in the back room washing the clothes that comes in for donations and folding those clothes. And it takes all of those people working together to
Right.
make this successful. So I'm I'm grateful for that all those types of people exist, and I'm excited to have more of them come on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
hmm
So, tell me about some of the people that are coming to the center, and you mentioned that it's not an abundance of people who are truly homeless, but it's more of people who are on assistance or ODSP, a disability pension, or working full time at a minimum wage job and being below the poverty line, right? Like there's a mix, but as you've been going along, tell me about some of the characters you're meeting.
Absolutely. It is such a diverse group.
Yeah.
We have those people who are homeless coming in. We have those people who are down and out. There's such a population of people in addiction right now, and that's one of the key focuses of the center as well. So we have a lot of addicts coming in, just seeking help. We have, characters. Yes, we have one gentleman that he's new to the country, and he comes in because he's trying to learn English, and he just wants to sit down with our volunteers and speak English
Yeah.
with them to develop that. So it's very interesting to see how vastly different each personality is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hearing their stories. They're all such unique stories. And it's been really interesting in that sense to kind of, again, our assumptions are so wrong, our assumptions about these people.
Yeah.
And it's just these little choices that changed their path. And now they're
Yeah.
realizing that if I had my time back, I'd do something a little bit differently. But the thing I'm discovering most with the people coming in, my assumption again would have been their biggest need is food or clothing, right? It's those emergency things. But really what the bulk of the people are looking for is just genuine human interaction and connection.
Yeah.
And I think we've lacked that for so long. That's what they need. So they will come in, they can get what they need and they can leave, but we're open from 6 to 10, and they will come in and they will spend their evening with us because they want to sit down and they just want to feel seen and heard
Yeah.
and loved. And that's where our volunteers thrive. They're there, they're, like I said, playing a board game or watching a movie or chatting and sharing a meal. And they're really just being that listening ear for somebody that needs
Yeah.
to talk and communicate. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to watch that process.
Yeah. Talk a bit about the spiritual part of the program. That's by the time the podcast is aired, you'll be just starting this fall, right?
Yes.
And so talk a little bit about some of the ideas that around spiritual formation.
Yes. So when someone comes in through the doors, primarily they're coming in first and foremost for the drop-in program. That's where we're meeting them. And we've come to the realization that's not necessarily the best time to deliver a sermon to somebody. They're not in that state of mind. So let's meet their immediate needs first. And then we look at our programs as kind of an arc of services. So that first piece is meeting their immediate needs, and that's through the drop-in and the donation center, etc. And that second step then is rehabilitation type programs. So we offer Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Al-Anon, which is kind of that support program for families of addicts. So that's kind of that reintegration piece. Rehabilitation piece. And
Yep.
then step 3 is the reintegration. And that is job skills training and life skills and
Yeah.
cooking classes. So we try to walk people through step 1, step 2, step 3. But amongst all of that, the foundation of everything we do is faith-based and Christian values. So as they're walking through those steps, we have Christian mentors that offer like a counseling service for them. We offer Christian-based programs. We have a part of our AA is like a small group spiritual discussion. And then in September, we're super excited to be launching kind of a scaled down version of church. So it's very much the basics of who is God. And a lot of these people, they don't have a dad that loves them. So we're tackling things like what is a heavenly father? What does it mean that my heavenly father loves me? And then from there, our prayer and our hope is that we get them plugged in to a local church. And we're starting to see that now. So it's so exciting to see how God is working through our volunteers, that now these people that have come through the doors, they've gone to AA and they're on a better track. And now they're actually going to church and sitting in the pew alongside our volunteers.
Yeah.
Which is amazing to see. And that's really the whole reason we do what we do.
Yeah. And Leamington is very much of a agricultural center. It's so many greenhouses and food processing and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of people that come from other parts of the world to work in that sector. And I know you're just a year in, but what are some of the things that you're seeing about needs within the migrant worker community?
Our drop-in program, a large portion of that is migrant workers coming in. A lot of them were wanting to go to our addiction programs, but weren't able to sit through it and really understand. So there was no value for them.
Right.
So something we recently launched is a Spanish version of AA. And it is packed. It is great. Like, I mean, it's great that they're attending, not great they're in that situation, but that we can offer something like that. We have a Spanish-based Bible study that happens on Sundays. So it's, we're still kind of growing in that area, and we're determining where the gaps are and what the needs are.
Yeah.
But we are welcoming to everybody at the center, and we're looking for ways to integrate and offer more services for the migrant workers.
Yeah. What kind of, generally speaking, there's always going to be the odd character, but for the guests that are coming in, what's their impression of what goes on? Are they coming back with regularity? Are they appreciative? Are they always trying, what's the climate of the guest?
Yeah, it's actually interesting to see. I would have expected to have a lot more challenges than we have. We average about 45 to 55 people a night. And for the most part, they're very respectful. They know that we are faith-based. They know we have our code of conduct, our expectations of behavior, and they follow that no problem. And they know that we're trying to do good for them and offer them something to help them. So they are very respectful, and it's interesting to see that they actually kind of police each other, and they tend to have relationships with each other. So we had one person a couple of weeks ago that was getting a little heated and escalated, and he was upset we were closing, and someone else that typically sits very quietly stood up and got him in line. So they're like, no, these people are great people with good intentions. Sit down, right? So they police each other. And it's really interesting to see their own relationships develop in a safe location as well. They're not out on the street confronting each other. We have set programming and a safe location for them to come in. And it's a journey to watch for us, and it's a journey for themselves as well.
Some city missions that I've had an observation of, there are times when the police and the ambulance are going to be There are sometimes, you know, 3 times in a day,
Mhm.
there's emergency services coming, just because of the level of brokenness and chaos and ill health and everything else.
Mhm.
You guys haven't called the police and the ambulance very much?
We've only had to do that twice so
Yeah,
far.
yeah.
And one situation was just a mental health crisis, and they were
Hmm.
able to intervene. The other one, someone came on the property that shouldn't have been on the property. And again, very respectful.
Yeah,
We just explained the situation, and he was super respectful and left. Now, that's not to say we're not going to have more challenges in the future
yeah,
going forward.
yeah.
I'm not naive to think, oh, everything's going to be great. But so far, we haven't had to deal with any major hurdles as of yet.
Mm,
I'm sure they're coming, but it
yeah.
hasn't been too bad.
Yeah, I think the hospitality, the relationship building that happens is central to maintaining that safe space.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree wholeheartedly. And it's at that point now because they're getting to know our volunteers.
Yeah,
They know what volunteers are there on certain days. We try to mix that up a little for safety of our volunteers,
yeah,
but they're
yeah.
getting to know them and know that these people are here to help you and invest in your life. And if you need shoes, we're going to the back room, we're getting you shoes,
Hmm.
right? So there is that
Yeah,
level of respect, like you said,
yeah,
based on relationship.
yeah. Are there, we're just about out of time, but are there any other things that you wanted to share or talk about in relation to LCHC or ministry in general? Or
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just super excited about really focusing on creating partnerships with our local churches.
Mhm.
And, I mentioned earlier about how our board and our staff are big dreamers. And I think it's so important to come alongside our local churches and dream together.
Yeah,
And I think the only way we're going to be able to be as impactful as we want to be is to work alongside other organizations within the community and our local churches. And, when we're working together and we create that
yeah,
cohesion and collaboration, that's when we're going to see huge impact and see God move across the community in
yeah,
such a bigger way than we can do on our own.
yeah, yeah. That interdependence.
Hmm.
The death knell I've seen in agencies and churches is when you get one that thinks, "Oh, we're going to do it all ourselves," and no, we don't care what anybody else is doing. We won't speak well of others. We're the only thing,
That's right.
and that just ends up crippling an organization and killing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're all trying to accomplish something together,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It makes sense to figure out how to work together effectively
yeah.
so that we can accomplish that greater good.
Yeah, you mix and you mingle and you figure out who your allies are and you work with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing the Leamington story today.
Thank you for having me. This has
Yeah.
been great. Yes, I didn't know some of it would be a therapy session. That's good.
Well, sorry, the
You never
the
know what you're going
pastor
to get
had, I
asked.
can't help that. I'm sorry.
That's right. That's right. No, this is great. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for having me today.
you bet, Jennifer. I'm so glad that God is still calling people like Jennifer Hyde to come to the least of these in our cities. And it gives me hope knowing that the gospel is changing lives. On our next episode, I'm going to be interviewing Bobby Riem. Bobby struggled for many, many years, actually from childhood really, with addiction. During a release from prison during the early days of COVID, he was released from jail and had nowhere to go but Tent City in Hamilton. So as he struggled as a homeless person in Tent City and within minutes was reacquainted with his bad habits, he was taking fentanyl and other things that were so destructive. But in the midst of that, God got a hold of him, brought him to Windsor, where he entered into recovery. And so the next story is one that just, we talk about miracles. Bobby Ream's story is miraculous. So until next time, be sure to like and subscribe this podcast, and I'll be back with my interview with Bobby Ream. I'm Kevin Rogers, and you're listening to Sidewalk Skyline Podcast.